FreeMMOStation.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to FreeMMOStation. I am Skylent Shore, here to do a first impression review on World of Tanks Generals. Now you heard me correct, guys. This is Generals, not just normal World of Tanks. This is World of Tanks Generals. Let's get the difference already out in the open here. This is a card game, okay? This is a World of Tanks card game. What's kind of interesting about this particular card game, and it's kind of following a similar theme as we see with more, I guess, electronic board game-ish games coming out, kind of like similar to Scrolls and a few others, where they're making use of the space on the board. So instead of something like Pokemon, which really doesn't have any sort of maneuverable space, or very similar to Hearthstone, this game actually has maneuverable spots or places, kind of similar to chess or checkers, Chinese checkers, you name it, or just kind of like Scrolls. There is actually a very small, it is very limited space, but there is maneuverability on this map, and it does make a difference in the game mechanics. It makes, even though it is very small, I have to admit, it's very limited amounts of squares, but it kind of plays into the strategy, and at the same time, the gameplay is very fast. You know, the matches are pretty quick, everything goes by really quickly, so I can say that the size of the board doesn't really matter. Now, me personally, if I was going to play a strategy game, let's see, I believe I just recently reviewed a strategy game called Combat Monsters. I liked the size of that board, and even then I thought that was a little bit small. It was hex-based. This one is square-based, so you can move up, and then you can move to the side, and I think some units can move or attack diagonally, and then some units can move twice to go up and then to the right. You can do that, but pretty much that's it. It's longer, elongated kind of map, and I need to talk about this first because it's very important, because it really kind of plays like a board game. Even though it is using cards and it is deck building, it is a collecting card game. You do have to actually manage your deck, and you do have like a limited amount of slots for certain cards, etc., etc. So it is a collecting card game, but it plays like a board game. You just kind of customize your pieces, and then you draw the pieces. So the board in itself, I think, is very interesting. So the way you want to win, okay, is you want to actually push all of your tanks, all of your units up against the enemy's HQ. Now the HQ is in the corners, the bottom left for yours and the bottom right for the enemies. You can only spawn in squares next to your HQ. So what you want is to put your biggest, heaviest tanks right next to their HQ, and then just bombard it. Now HQs can bombard each other from across the map. HQs can attack any card anywhere as long as it's spotted. So spotting, how does it work? One tank needs to be next to another tank. Unless you have some sort of card that gives an effect that can attack an unspotted tank or can spot tanks, you do need one card next to another card. Now that can be diagonal as well. So some cards can attack twice. Some are like ability cards that give you another turn. Some will heal you. So your HQ does have armor points or HP, as well as your tanks and your vehicles. They also have HP, and they have damage values. Now some of the damage values are going to be changed, like certain tank classes can attack first, and if they destroy that tank, then that damage won't be dealt back to them, but it kind of works like Hearthstone or Magic, where damage is dealt simultaneously unless the card otherwise states it. Now, for the most part, it seems these cards aren't exactly intricate. Now, if you play Magic the Gathering, you know what I mean by intricate. There are lots of different spells with a huge variety of effects, and like any one spell card could do a multitude of different things depending on if you choose it, depending on the different conditions. Now, let's see, Hearthstone is a little bit more simple, and Pokemon as well is also very simplistic. So this game is probably the most simple card game I've ever seen, because really it's more about the maneuverability and the board game style of it. So even then, the board game aspect of the game is pretty simple, and then the strategy components to the different spell effects or the different effects of different tanks and the number of different tanks, it's pretty, overall simple. Now I am just getting into the game, so it's very possible that the starter deck just has simple effect cards, so maybe later on there's going to be deeper things, and it being a free-to-play game, of course we can always expect tons of updates and stuff like that, guys, but I think overall it's pretty easy to get into. Now, one complaint that I have, and this is probably going to be my only true complaint about the game, is that if you go into a game like Hearthstone, where it is a digital card game, but they make use of that with polish. You have things that you're not going to have in a normal board game, where their board is actually animated. I mean, you can go and pet the griffin if you want to. You can go and shoot catapults. You can just click around the map, and it's all animated, and it's super well polished, and the card effects look really amazing. And then we come into World of Tanks Generals, where you don't have any of that. I mean, you barely have any animations whatsoever. Now, I think it would be excusable if the cards themselves actually were animated while playing the game, but they're not. They're just stills, and the board itself is stills, and the artwork itself as well is not exactly, I guess, up to par with what I would want in a modern day digital card game, or board game or whatever. I don't even know what this emerging genre really is. So, like Scrolls. I mean, Scrolls is the same way, but even though the art is a little bit lesser, it's a little bit more simplistic and cartoon, it's still freaking animated. Now, this game, it's really not animated, and I could say that, you know, coming into it, it just looks a little bit harsh. It doesn't quite have the brightness and the color and the character that Hearthstone has. So that's my only true complaint. Other than that, you know, playing the game, I kind of felt like it was actually kind of interesting. I could see it maybe being competitive. Definitely. Now, one thing to talk about is let's take away from the gameplay and let's kind of look away and go look at how to get the cards, you know, because that's a big thing, okay? How do you get these cards? It actually works just like World of Tanks. You are going to have a tech tree, and as you play the game, you kind of research different vehicles or cards, and then you purchase them and buy them, and I mean, that's pretty much it. Unlike Hearthstone, which is hugely luck-based, it's a lot more expensive to get these cards and everything, but then again, we don't know how many cards are going to be in World of Tanks Generals. We don't know which ones are going to be super competitive. We just don't know that, so it might still be just as pay-to-win-ish. I mean, it's a collecting card game. You're not going to get around the paywall. Yes, you're going to need the cards and collect the cards to be competitive. That's just how it is, but luckily this game does make it pretty easy and to understand how to get the cards, where Hearthstone, it's a little bit more ambiguous because of all the randomness. Now, playing the game, let's see. I don't know if I agree with this setup, right? Because you're drawing cards, you don't know what cards you're going to get. I mean, RNG is always going to be a mechanic in a collecting card game, but as a board game mechanic, sometimes you're just not going to get the cards that you want in the right places, and that's going to be a little bit frustrating, especially when you have to actually move cards. Now, in Hearthstone, you can place down a card, even if it's not the card that you want, at least it's going to be useful. In this game, sometimes the tanks are going to be totally worthless, or the vehicles are going to be worthless until you actually get them in position, so you're gonna have multiple turns of just uselessness. Now, I was going against one competitor, PvP. This is not an AI character. This is actually a player. I was going against him, and I won pretty much the 30 minutes in. I had really good draws. I was super aggressive, and because of that, because I stopped and blocked his spawning super early, and he had no spell cards, well, basically I won, but the game was still drawn out. Now, this is also a mechanic in RTS games. We know this. If you play RTS games, you know this, where you know you're going to win, the enemy knows you're going to win, but they still stall it out because you haven't destroyed all their equipment and all that, blah, blah, blah. I kind of wish that there was another win condition, but you can play drawn-out games like that. It can be boring, but I think it's kind of interesting as well, because there is that mechanic where if you do block out their spawns, that's a strategy. That's an actual tactic. It's not completely atrocious. Maneuvering around the board, and there are some vehicles that can attack across the board. There are spell abilities, and you need to actually build your deck around that. You can't just have the biggest, bulkiest tanks, because maybe then the enemy team will have a bunch of light tanks and just shoot them from afar, or they can maneuver around and dodge them. Now, the board isn't that big, but I think a more balanced deck is going to be stronger than the starter decks that we're given. The starter decks actually have a huge emphasis on big, heavy tanks, and I think it's probably better to have a nice mix of all of them, if not an emphasis on spell cards, actually, because the spell cards can hit any vehicle at any spot and do damage or heal. So overall, I think I would like to analyze the deck building a little bit more. I would like to see more different types of cards. So far, all I see is modifications to your HQ damage, because you can actually attack, that's pretty big, actually. The HQ, modifying the HQ is big because, well, that's your life pool, so if you have any sort of thing to defend it, that's just strong. And also because you can attack anybody at any position. So if you can increase the strength of your HQ, then you increase your overall strength and your overall power tremendously. I mean, you just can shut down anybody. You can have so much board control just by leveling up your HQ. So you have HQ modifiers, you have tank modifiers, which, I mean, I'm going to kind of put those into spell cards, because you can have damaging ones where you actually do damage to a tank, or you heal a tank, or give it an extra turn. So you do have some ability cards, but they seemed a little bit simplish. I would like to see a little bit more variety with that. Now, with the actual tanks themselves, it seems like there is a nice variety with the tanks, and I would like to see a little bit more creative effects with these. Now, in Hearthstone, we have so many creative cards, right? I mean, any other card game, like, there's so many creative different kind of monsters and things. Like, if it dies, it can maybe spawn 2 more monsters, stuff like that. I don't know if we're going to get that with this game. We might. Maybe if we have a supply truck or a a transportation vehicle, and if it dies, then maybe it'll send out 3 infantry or something like that. I mean, we might be able to get that, but it is World of Tanks, so I'm assuming that most, if not all, of the vehicles will be tanks. But there might be a transportation tank. I don't know, guys. We might be able to see them, but right now, as a first impression, I'm not seeing that. It seems incredibly simplistic. So my first impressions of Hearthstone was phenomenal. I had a lot of fun with Hearthstone. We see where it is, and my first impressions with this game, it's interesting. It definitely is an interesting concept, but I don't think it has the color and character that Hearthstone has. And that makes sense. It's tanks. It's going to be hard to do that, but I kind of wish that its overall polish was a little bit more, I don't know, and just enhanced. I want to see more animations, more different spell effects, stuff like that. That's what I want. And of course, being a free-to-play game, it can always be updated, and we can always get more cards, and that's actually what we are expecting. So, there's that. This was a huge rant, guys. Thanks for listening. I'm Skylant Shore with FreeMMOStation. Thank you very much for watching. I had a lot of fun playing this game, actually. I mean, I'm not terribly enthralled, but it was at least fun. So as soon as you get the chance, maybe try it out. If you're a card collecting game fan or board game fan, or if you like World of Tanks, you're gonna enjoy this game. Very likely, you might not fall in love with it, but it's not horrible. I can say that. Okay, guys, make sure to check out FreeMMOStation.com and like and subscribe if you want to keep seeing the content coming. I'll be back later, guys. See you again.